Change isn't just coming, it's already here. This is Ask for Change podcast, hosted by leadership expert Meridith Elliott Powell. Brings you weekly conversations with leaders and experts who are redefining success in a world of disruption. Let's begin today's journey and turn uncertainty into your competitive advantage.
Let's turn uncertainty into your competitive advantage. This is Meridith Elliott Powell, your host. Super excited about our show today because we are going to talk about two subjects that I think, don't get enough attention. And they're especially important when we think about turning uncertainty to competitive advantage. I want to welcome to the show, a true legend in the field of emotional intelligence. She is now an expert in the field of mentorship, having published books on both subjects. And she's a sales guru, a best-selling author. I want to welcome Colleen Stanley to the show.
Wow, what an introduction. Now everybody's expectations are she better be really smart, engaging, and enlightening. So I'll do my best.
Well, I think you are all of those things. Listen, I want to really dive right in because I want to start with emotional intelligence. When I think about Colleen Stanley, it is synonymous with emotional intelligence. So many people talk about emotional intelligence, but very few, if any, you're the only one I know who's really dedicated their career to emotional intelligence. What drove that? Like, why emotional intelligence? And just so we get the audience on the same page, what exactly is emotional intelligence?
So that's a good way to start. And I would say the definition, an easy one to understand, is very, very similar to emotional self-awareness, which is actually the mega skill in emotional self-awareness. So it's really understanding the emotions you're thinking and feeling. However, with heightened emotional intelligence, you also become aware of what other people are thinking or feeling. So that's called empathy. Then you understand why you're feeling the emotion, but you don't sit there and go down that rabbit hole then of desperation, feeling sorry for yourself. But you start understanding, like, why am I getting triggered? Maybe I'm triggering other people, or why are other people getting triggered? And then most importantly, how that affects how you show up in life, sales, and business. And so until we understand, why we're not acting the way we're supposed to, I don't know who coined it first, Meredith, the knowing and doing gap, but that's what I believe EQ can do for us in life. There's so much, great content out there, and you see it in your work every day. So we know what to do. Why aren't we doing it? And often these soft skills can bridge that gap.
Are you seeing, I think that emotional intelligence has always been important, but is it becoming heightened in the world of AI or disconnection that we seem to find ourselves in today?
You know what? It is interesting that you asked the question because I'm seeing it become heightened. And in fact, there was a little bit of not concern, but, thought in my head, like, okay, this has been a topic around for a long time. Are people going to be tired of it? And I'm seeing more and more requests around it. And so I do think because, the old adage is in a world where we're technically more connected, we are more disconnected. And the research from Gallup keeps showing that employee engagement is going down. People I don't feel like they belong at work, which can tie into maybe lack of emotional intelligence from the leadership and in workplaces. But this is where it also ties into mentorship. Because leaders are busy. You work with them every day. And as much as they're supposed to be spending one-on-one time with their teams, sometimes they're not. That's where a good mentor, an emotionally intelligent mentor, can step up and fill that gap. So you don't necessarily need a big title or office. You need to be somebody that's willing to look up and see, hey, who needs some help around here? And then offer that help, whether it's encouragement, tough love, any form of mentoring.
I define today, I feel like leaders are spending less and less and less time with the people that they support at a time when the people they support need more attention and more. They need so much help trying to navigate everything that's happening in the marketplace. So I want to talk about this idea of mentorship, and I want to talk about it with emotional intelligence because, again, I think you're in a unique category, really bringing the two together. What and let's really dive into, I'm curious, what drove you down the path of wanting to study mentorship? You have this whole, this whole portfolio of emotional intelligence. What drew you into the mentorship gap?
Well, it was interesting. And I know you do a lot of hiking, as I do out here in Colorado. And truly, one of my friends coined it best. She called it the divine download. So I'm literally, Meredith, out hiking, and I hear this, not verbally, but be the mentor who mattered. Now, and that's the title of the book, Be the Mentor Who Mattered. And I thought, where the heck did that come from? But I did go home and buy the URL. Something was in my head. And then when I realized, because a practice that I've embedded into my life with the work I do in emotional intelligence, and it's a non-negotiable, I spend quiet time with myself every morning. And there's a variety of reasons for that. I start with gratitude. I can start with reflection. So I am a person that's a pretty high driver, and it's gotten much, much better. But, there's days I can be a jerk, and I better figure out why I was a jerk, especially, when I've got books out there in emotional intelligence. Like I don't like being incongruent, right?
Yeah, there's a disconnect there.
Yeah. And, I'm a person of faith. So some of it is spiritual reading and such. And so what I realized is that in my gratitude time, I would do this inventory of all the mentors I had in my life and give them thanks for being there. And so I think it started with that. Then the more I dove into why am I wanting to write about this? Again, it's not in my wheelhouse and technically and such, is that when I was 14, one of my brothers, John, was killed in a car accident. And, he was just a terrific human being, not because he's gone. You know how people, when they're gone, they're terrific. No, John was a terrific human being. And so, anytime something like that happens, it is difficult. And my parents divorced then, I think it was within about a year. And it was a very contentious divorce, continued to be the rest of my life. And so luckily for me, I had mentors that stepped up. So when my parents weren't emotionally capable, so I'm not blaming them. I mean, you got to get rid of that red wagon. It's very heavy. But they just weren't emotionally capable at certain times in my life to offer the advice and support. But guess who showed up? Mentors. Yeah. So that's why I'm very, very passionate about the topic for personal reasons, and then professionally what it did for me as well.
Do you need to be emotionally intelligent to be a mentor?
You know what I think you need from an emotional intelligence piece? And I don't know if it falls, I don't know which bucket I would put it under. I believe you just need a desire to serve and help. Yeah. I mean, that's, when you take a look, and you and I know this, we work with very successful, busy people. We have colleagues that fall into that same bucket. And so they're busy. And you know what? They're always generous. And the other thing we tried to do with this book is that my experience when I was in corporate is I was in a startup that blew up. So today, Varsity Spirit Corporation, today they are the largest, they post revenues of over $3 billion. But in the startup years, it was fast growth. So we didn't have formal mentorship programs. We didn't even know what it was. However, if you read the book, I received a lot of mentorship. So I'm more into encouraging people that mentorship can happen in a moment. It can happen in one conversation, because I would have a conversation with someone and all of a sudden it changed my belief system, the trajectory of the actions I was going to take. So as much as I'm for formal mentorship programs, a lot of small and medium-sized companies don't have those in place, and therefore they don't think they can do it, that they have to have some big psychology degree. So mentorship can happen in a moment. And that's what I'm encouraging everyone. Look for the moments that you can offer somebody encouragement. So I want to give one example, because I know I've been talking here a lot. So yesterday, my husband and I went out, and okay, I hope the audience doesn't hang up at this point. My husband loves Denny's.
Oh.
The guy could buy a meal at a Michelin restaurant, but no, he likes Denny's. And so he was like, "You want to go to Denny's?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." So it's completely empty when we go in, and there's a waitress. And you know how you get that feeling with the waiter or waitress that there's something else going on in this person.
Yeah.
And so she was just very attentive. And I said, "What do you do besides when you're not working?" And she started telling me about, I'm getting a degree in design. I'm studying online. I don't want to work 2 jobs anymore. And so starts telling me about her aspirations. And then she stopped and she said, "Thank you for asking me."
Oh.
Now, I don't know if that's going to make any long-term difference in her life. I hope it does some way. She said, "You're the first person that's ever asked." And I
Yeah.
said, well, you're really sharp, so keep it up.
Oh,
That
see,
could be a
that's the stuff that makes the difference, right?
well, I'm hoping it does.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it does. And so, who knows? Maybe for the next month, she'll say, somebody told me I was sharp. Somebody was interested. That's a great field you're in. Don't give it up. And so those are, if we're more intentional, and I'm not looking at my phone at breakfast or anything, and neither is my husband, because he knows if he does with the work I do, he'll be in serious trouble. But part of it is, see, I wasn't on my phone or doing one of these, I'll have the eggs and da 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 da. So some of it's paying attention. That's
Yeah.
important in empathy, emotional intelligence, and mentorship.
Yeah, and I think I think it's got to be the number one way we tell people we care about them. I mean, and nothing is. I was at we were in the Dominican Republic with our mastermind, and there's a subject there we talked about. I want to ask you about, and
Yeah.
I went up to the desk. I'm paying to be in this all inclusive resort, and I'm in the middle of the conversation, and the person behind the desk picked the phone up, and what I thought to my, because with what we do for a living, everything's a learning moment, right? Like you're
Yeah.
looking for something you can use in a keynote or a workshop or something.
Right.
And I thought to myself, that was the signal that I was irrelevant. I
Yes.
mean, the moment that he stopped focusing on me and picked the phone up, and even though he said, I'll be just a moment, it told me that I was in mid-sentence and that I didn't matter and that what I was saying didn't matter. And I think, Colleen, where we are in the world today, I think those little things are magnetized. I think they mattered 5 years ago. I think
Mhm.
it's so much more important today.
It is. And, you look at all the ways that companies try to create differentiation, right? And I just had a conversation with a prospect yesterday, and she said, and I thought she said it best, she goes, our salespeople need to be our differentiator. And it has to be in how they create a great customer experience, because this particular company, there's like a 7-year development journey.
Wow.
So that has to be a good experience there. So, and they are like on fire with their innovation, but see, they weren't looking for an innovation speaker. Maybe they will at some point, but theirs was, this experience must be stellar. That's what's going to keep us ahead of our competitor. And I found that very interesting, just with her saying it and not me saying it. Mhm.
One thing that I think is such a value in what you're talking about, and again, you're the only person I've heard talk about mentorship in moments, like really doing it small, is that Sam Richter, a good friend of ours, was talking about the fact, he brought up this interesting point when we were meeting, and he said, a few years ago, we were all sitting here watching older people get laid off and the younger generation taking over the workforce. Now it's completely flipped with AI. And what's happened is the younger people are struggling to find a job, and companies are letting younger people, inexperienced people go and holding on to people with more experience.
Yes.
And what Sam said is what that's going to create, it's great for now, but it's going to create a major knowledge gap. Because
Mhm.
eventually people who will reach a retirement age, or they'll just be exhausted, and they'll get out of the workforce, and with them, they're going to take that knowledge. So I would assume that what you're talking about in closing that gap in what's happening, I mean, I work in HVAC and I work a lot in the trades.
Mhm.
Gaps are unbelievable in the trades. I imagine companies even doing informal mentorship would be a way to start to close that gap.
It absolutely is. And this is where I would go back to, sometimes it's not going to be the manager or the leader that's
Yeah.
providing that mentorship, even though you and I both know that. Okay, we both know that. But this is where, peer mentoring can be great. And this is where it could be, and in this case, a veteran paying attention to, like, this new professional doesn't know what the heck they're doing. And none of us did when we started. And
Right.
so, and I was lucky because I share a story in the book about I laugh because the two women's names were Betty and Lynette. And by any definition, I mean, they were just a couple of tough old broads, right? I mean, like, Lynette could make a drag on a cigarette last 5 minutes. Betty would just put her glasses down. She did not suffer fools well. However, I'm brand new into sales. Varsity is just building out a sales team. And so we didn't have managers that you could call. I mean, you could, but Don was so busy. He was
Yeah.
building the company. So I would call these two women and bug them. And because, desperation drives activity. And so in this case, I'd get Betty on the phone and she'd go, uh-huh, uh-huh. And then she'd go, oh. And then she literally, I can hear her saying, she goes, Lynette, pick up the phone. Our girl's got herself in trouble again. And then they both get on the phone. And I'd either have, an upset coach, because as I like to joke, varsity I was in the apparel division. So if Buffy doesn't get her pom-poms, that's chaos for the day and stuff. Or I simply didn't know how to sell a product. Now think about it. These two women were not getting recognized for it. Nobody knew I was bugging them. Yeah. They weren't getting commission. Generous. And I think maybe they also thought, if we can get these youngsters, these young professionals up and running, this will be a great company. And it is, again, largest in the world today in their industry. So I think, the other thing we're hoping to bring with this book is mentorship isn't just this skill set. It's a mindset.
Yeah.
It's a mindset. So, like when you're hiring people, are you hiring people that are generous, selfless, willing to, give of their time and talent? And so are you vetting for that in your onboarding programs? Are you letting know that's a core value of ours? We know we're hiring you to get your job done. You're being hired to help other people get their jobs done. Look up and look around. So the whole idea of mentorship is it's got to be a mindset that gets embedded in the culture.
How do you get people past, I always say when I work in companies, I always say the greatest value you are as a leader is, can you create 3 or 4 people around you better than you are at doing the job? Like if I go to work for a company, I'm valuable, but if I can produce 3 of me, I become invaluable. But there's a mindset around that. And the mindset is, I don't want to teach anybody else a skill, because if I teach them a skill, then maybe I'm working myself out of a job, or the company won't be as dependent upon me. Like, where do you start with that?
I would take that back to the emotional intelligence bucket under emotional self-awareness, because all of us in some way, shape, or form have something we call self-limiting beliefs driven by negative self-talk. And so for some reason, this person that thinks and believes that if I teach someone else, I'm going to become irrelevant or get displaced. So we've got to get to the root cause of that. Like, where is that coming from? And maybe they saw it happen to a friend. It happened to a parent. So now that experience becomes their data. And they're taking a fiction story that they're making it up and turning it into a nonfiction. The other thing in emotional intelligence, you have to look at the fear, right? So where, again, it goes back to self-limiting beliefs, but the belief is, if somebody else gets as smart as me, then I'm not the smartest guy or gal in the room. Well, so let's take a look. Let's unpack that. Aren't you going to be perceived as the smartest guy or gal in the room because you are so capable of developing people, which is the hardest thing in the world to do? You have to kind of shift their, as your new book, your perspective. They've got to shift their perspective and the lens by which they look at the world.
Yeah. So for somebody listening out there who wants to get started as a mentor, and maybe their company doesn't even have a formal mentoring process, maybe nobody's even talking to them about mentorship, but this appeals to them, where and how do they start?
I think everything starts with the decision. And I know that sounds very simple. It starts with the decision. I am going to be a mentor. I'm capable of being a mentor, and I have the time to be a mentor. Because what we also worked on in the book is, everybody knows mentorship is important. I mean, for heaven's sake, Socrates taught Plato the art of inquiry. It's been around for a long time. So why aren't we all doing it? Well, sometimes we don't think we have the time. And people are busy. I mean, they've got aging parents, they're raising teenagers, they're in the midst of building their career. But if you think about it, everyone's got 30 minutes in a month. Just stop the scrolling. Take a look at your calendar. Where could you tack something else on? Like I've even said, hey, offer to have a mentee drive you to the airport. It's 45 minutes of mentorship that can happen in the car. Okay, reimburse them for the gas. I don't care, right? But so you can tack things on. The second thing is, I believe people don't think they're capable. Again, big title, big office, big accomplishments. But think about it. You can be an encouragement mentor. Just by how you live your life, you can be a resiliency mentor. I mean, you and your sister are doing that with your podcast. You guys are shining examples of resiliency, right? You can be a tough love mentor. you're the person that, guess what? I'm going to tell you what you need to hear versus what you want to hear. So there's competencies besides the usual business ones we look at to be a mentor.
So, I'd love to know how people, I always like to end the podcast with just a couple of questions, and you can answer them either way. But, you talked a little bit about, I thought you did such a great job in the book of really talking about the fact that mentorship isn't only what you give, it's what you get. I mean, that there's this hidden, value to you in mentorship. So, as we come to a close of the podcast, I want people to know how to find out about you, how to find out both about your emotional intelligence and mentorship books, because the truth is, I mean, you're getting ready to combine both into a workshop. They're not really separate pieces. So how do people find out about you? How do they find their books? And then what is your greatest piece of advice as people look at the uncertainty of 2026, what we're facing in this year, the pace of change, the rise of AI? What's your greatest advice out there as it relates to emotional intelligence and mentorship that people need to follow to turn uncertainty to competitive advantage?
First of all, I'll tell them where they can find me, and that's go to my website or LinkedIn profile. The website is salesleadershipdevelopment.com. And so we've got lots of free resources there. You'll find the books, the links to Amazon there. And then let's talk about the topic that you're such an expert in, which is change and asking for change. So I think there's maybe 2 or 3 things, and you probably, I know, talk about this with your audience. But number one, stop resisting. There's an old adage, I'm not sure who gets the credit for this. Maybe it's Carl Jung, I think. What you resist persists. The more you resist something, like think about, when you've gone into something and you're just, this is not going to happen. It's happening.
Yeah.
When you stop resisting, then you allow your body, mind, heart to take in what needs to happen. Okay. The second thing I believe with change is, recognize, we all know change is difficult, study the change curve, all of that, where you go through denial and fear, and then you got to climb out of it and stuff. But with that change curve is get a group like what you're involved with, your mastermind.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I think with the pace of change, you cannot go it alone anymore. I mean, the amount of information coming in, you will need to have a group of people that you're surrounding yourself with to help. That's why mentorship is so important. It's going to be the young mentoring the seasoned veteran, mentoring the old. And then I would always say with change is, take some time to sit and reflect on when you thought a change was bad. All the wonderful lessons that came out of that. And so this is what people that are really resilient do, that when they're going through adversity or they have an obstacle, they have trained their brain to say, what's good about this?
Yeah.
And that is where I go when I hit adversity now. It wasn't always this way. When I hit adversity, I go, what's good about this? Where's going to be the lesson? And that lesson may not show up for 3 months, 5 months. It always shows up. So I think it's having that belief system that it's here. Quit resisting it. Surround yourself by people that are going to help you through the change. And then what's good about it?
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite sayings. I say it every morning in my gratitudes. I always say, I need to trust the journey. I'm exactly where I need to be, and I need to trust the journey. Well, Colleen, I can't thank you enough. This has been an amazing interview. I'm so excited about your work around mentorship. I really feel like it's truly the opportunity to cure what is challenging most organizations today. There's just not the time for formal training programs as much. There's not the time for formal mentorship, but we all can step to the plate and we all can be an amazing mentor. But
absolutely,
I'd back up and do a little bit of work on the front end and get Colleen's emotional intelligence so that you can be an even sharper mentor. So thank you again so much for your time today. Audience, thank you for joining us. We'll see you right back here next week for another episode of Ask for Change.